Welcome to the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life. My name is Kyle Case, and I'll be your host on this amazing journey as we attempt to help you get the most out of your life. Joining me in the studio today is my co-pilot, Andy Groft. Andy, how are you today?
I'm doing really good, Kyle. Thank you.
Awesome. It's always a joy. It's just a pleasure to be with you. Every time that we get to be together, it's a joy.
That's so nice. Thank you.
Well, I only say it because it's true.
Thanks.
So, hey, Andy, does the name Roger Bannister mean anything to you?
Yes.
It does.
It does. I remember learning about that name in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So, great memory, by the way.
Well, I don't know if it's a great memory. I really do remember learning about him because we had a big discussion in school, and it was really cool to me that he did what he did.
Well, he does have an incredible story. And for those who don't remember the 3rd grade discussion that they might have had about Roger Bannister was the first ever person to break the 4-minute mile barrier.
That's right.
Which was incredible. I mean, just absolutely incredible. Now, I've said before on the show and to anybody who will listen that I do not consider myself a runner. I'm not a runner. I have ran a few races, done a couple of triathlons, done some 5Ks and things like that, but I'm really not a runner. I don't get that runner's high. At least I haven't yet got the runner's high that people talk about. In addition to running a race or two, though, I do occasionally run just to try to keep in shape. And Andy, my best ever pace for a mile is not that far off from about 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. I mean, I feel like when I'm running an 8-minute mile that I'm actually running. I'm not just jogging. I'm not shuffling along. But to me, I feel like I'm moving, and that's about as fast as I can move. So when I think about running a 4-minute mile, that's a pretty incredible thing to me.
Yeah, for someone to run 2 miles in the time it takes you to run 1.
I know, because a mile's a long ways. Now, the thing about Roger Bannister that's so cool is that at that time, in the mid-1950s, no one really believed that it could be done. They didn't think that the human body could run a 4-minute mile. The experts all agreed that it was just too much to ask for. But they did say that if it were to be done, if it was ever going to be done, then absolutely perfect conditions would have to be in place. And during that time in history, there were a lot of people that were shooting for it. They were really trying, and the experts were like, no, it just can't be done. But they said that if it were to happen, then it would have to have a certain level of humidity in the air. There'd have to be a very, very slight tailwind. You'd have to be running on a specific surface. The first lap would have to be your slowest. You'd have to pick up speed, and your last lap would have to be your fastest.
So they really thought this through. The scientists did.
They had really given this some thought, and in reality, these perfect conditions just basically don't exist in an outside meet.
Right.
You can control things indoors nowadays a lot to a great degree, but in those days, where an outdoor track, it just didn't exist, and that's why people thought that it couldn't be done.
Right.
So the thing is about in May 6th of 1954 was the day of the race when this happened, and pretty much none of those conditions were met. It had been raining. It was kind of a stormy day. It was windy right until the beginning of the race. In fact, Roger said leading up to the race that he was just going to not run it because he wanted to save his energy. The surface wasn't anything special. It was just cinder, which they ran on at that time. When he ran his race, his first lap was his fastest lap. His last lap was his slowest lap. But you know what Roger had that allowed him to do it that no one had predicted? He had 2 runners, Chris Chataway and Chris Basher, who led out and were his pace guys. They were the ones who set the pace for him. They kind of bucked the wind, if you will. And then Roger, of course, came around them and kicked it out in the end. And no one had predicted that was going to happen. And so when he broke the 4-minute barrier, it was really almost miraculous, almost a miracle. Now, once he broke the barrier, several people did it, even immediately after. It's kind of like anything, once that first time happens, then it becomes possible.
That's right.
But he was the one who did the impossible, that made it possible. But I think that the real lesson here for all of us, is that no one does anything great by themselves. Mm-hmm. We all have a support group, whether it's family or friends, whether that group is large or small, that help us do the things that we do. And especially those who have achieved greatness in their lives, they have that support group. And so the key is to surround yourself with greatness and then to rise with the tide.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah, and speaking of being surrounded with greatness, every October when the games roll around, the Huntsman World Senior Games, I feel that is the case for me. I always truly and legitimately feel surrounded by greatness. And today we have joining us a very special guest, joining us by phone actually. Her name is Linda Cohn, and she is one of this year's Hall of Fame inductees. Linda, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
How are you doing, Linda?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you both doing?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, and especially joining us by phone and taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We're excited to visit with you.
Thank you.
So tell me, Linda, just to get us started off here, do you agree with that sentiment and that idea that no one ever accomplishes anything great without being surrounded by a support group?
Yes, I totally agree with that. But it's amazing. The people that support you don't have to be great themselves. They just have to be positive and encouraging, and it can lead to greatness from people that might not have ever achieved it on their own. I agree.
Well, that's true, and it's so fantastic. And just being positive in and of itself is certainly a form of greatness. It's not easy to do that, and if you surround yourself with positive people, it can make a big difference. So Linda, you are a track and field athlete. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. However, it would be better if you called me a field and track athlete because most of the events I do are the field events.
Okay, all right. So that's good to know. We'll keep that distinction in mind. Tell us just a little bit about how you got involved in field and track, and then maybe how you got involved in the Huntsman World Senior Games.
Okay, well, the story goes way back. When I was younger and I would watch the Olympics on TV, there was something about it that really called to me. I was captivated by track and field, and I'd always wondered if I'd really practiced, if I could have been good enough to be in the Olympics. That didn't happen, but I had heard somewhere along the way that there was something called Senior Olympics, and I had it in my mind when I was old enough, I was going to do Senior Olympics. And when I turned 50, which was the minimum age to compete, I was at a bike race, and someone gave me a pamphlet for the Huntsman World Senior Games. And that was it. It was like a lightning bolt went off, and it was, I'm finally old enough. I can do this. This is what I've been waiting to do, and I was ready. And I looked at the brochure, and there was a multitude of things available, anything from swimming, you name it, lawn bowling. But to me, the Olympics had always been track and field, so that's what I decided to do.
So I've got just a couple of questions for you based on what you said there. You watched the Olympics on television, like many of us do, and got inspired by the track and field part. Now, I kind of tend to agree with you. There are some amazing athletes in all sports across the board, but track and field kind of, in a lot of ways, just epitomizes what the Olympics are, and that great original Greek sport, along with wrestling, which I happen to be a wrestler, but those are the two sports that really stand out to me. But you said that you watched those sports and you kind of questioned or wondered in the back of your mind if maybe you might have been able to reach that. Were you involved as a youth in competitive sports? Did you have the opportunity to compete when you were a kid?
Not really. The only thing that was available when I was younger, I was a girl in the 50s and 60s, and we didn't do much competitive athletics. But somehow my parents had found softball. So I had played softball in a recreational league, but never track and field, nothing like that until I turned 50 and decided I was going to train to compete in the Huntsman World Senior Games.
Wow. And then you also said that you were at a bike race. Now, were you racing or were you just helping? Or?
Oh, no, I wasn't racing. I was looking for interesting things to do. The week before that bike race, which wasn't really a race, it was a century bike ride, a 100-mile bike ride. I had tried to run the LA Marathon with very little and very inadequate training. So I was in the mood to try new things, but what I didn't realize was it was Huntsman that I was supposed to be getting ready for.
Linda, this is Andy. I loved when you said that you just started running track when you were 50, because anytime I hear that, it just makes me happy, because so many people think, I'm 45, I'm 48, I'm 52, it's too late. And when I hear of people like you who started when they were 50 and then have seen such great success over the last decade or so, it really makes me happy.
Well, you could call me a late bloomer, and a lot of people have. I like what my older son says. He refers to me as an evergreen instead of a late bloomer. But,
I like that.
No, I had no track or field background, and it was all very new to me. And I had no idea, honestly, when I randomly chose to learn how to throw the javelin, that it was going to lead where it's led me through these past 12 years now, almost.
So that kind of brings me to a question I had. You said most of the events that you do are field and some of them track. What is, what's your signature event? What are the favorite ones that you do?
Well, I have a signature event. It is the javelin. That was the first event I randomly chose to do. In fact, I chose it by saying, I'm going to learn how to throw that stick. I knew nothing about it. And I happened to find a young man at a nearby college, and I talked him into training me, and he did. He trained me as he'd been trained as an 18-year-old young man, and I never said uncle, and I learned the basics and then some, how to throw the javelin. That is my main event. In fact, some people call me Javelinda, so it's my signature and my name. And it is the main event that I actually train for. I do other events because while I'm trying to keep in shape and do things, I thought, well, I'll try other events. And so I'm not just going to a track meet to compete with the javelin. I'll typically do 6 when I go.
Okay, so now just out of curiosity, javelin is your signature event. Of the 6 or so events that you do in track and field, which is the one that's the toughest for you, that you don't look forward to and that you might not excel at as much as javelin?
Oh, that's easy. I make myself run the 100 meters because I want to do track and field. So I don't train to run. And what's interesting is that track meets, people train and specifically are runners. Plus, they have a history of running through high school and college. And I'll go out there with my recess-type running speed and no real training and do the best I can, but it's always difficult for me to make myself do it. And then once I get to the line, I want to win. And you really can't win if you don't put the effort into it.
Well, I think that's true in everything, but the fact that you're willing to just kind of put yourself out there and try new things is makes you a winner in my book, at least, for sure. So that's fantastic.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life, and we're visiting with Linda Cohn, who is a longtime Huntsman World Senior Games athlete. She's a self-proclaimed field and tracker, as she says, and really her signature event is the javelin. But you said that you do 6 different events. What are the other events? You mentioned the javelin, you mentioned the 100 meters. What other things do you do?
Well, typically I'll do the shot put, the discus, the javelin, long jump, triple jump, and then the 100 meters.
Okay. That sounds like a pretty good track meet by the time it's all said and done.
It's busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it is. So, Linda, you hold several Masters records that you set at the Huntsman World Senior Games and possibly at other meets. Tell us what records you hold and kind of how that makes you feel as someone who started the practice of track and field in your 50s, and now here you are a world record holder. How does that make you feel? So, what are the records, and how do you kind of reconcile that in your mind and in your heart?
Well, I'll tell you, the first records I ever set were the first time I went to Huntsman. I competed in 4 events, the javelin, 50-meter, 100-meter, and long jump, and I actually set 3 meet records, and it wasn't in the javelin.
Really? In your very first meet?
Which is interesting. In terms of records, currently in track and field, there are age group records, and you compete in 5-year age groups. And I'm currently in the women's 60 to 64 group. Currently, at this moment, I hold the world record with the javelin, and I can't tell you how that makes me feel. It's a dream that I never dared to dream until I started, and then I just kept setting bigger and bigger goals, and it makes me feel happy. Not that anybody outside of track and field really knows about it, but it's something that is inside, and I think it's empowered me to do other things in other areas of my life, not just athletics.
So what do you do as far as training goes? Like on a normal day, do you run? Do you lift weights? Do you just get out on the field and throw the javelin? What's kind of your training regimen like?
Okay, well, most people I know think I don't train enough. And the only event I actually train at all in is the javelin. The way I go about getting ready for track meets is I do everything I can to stay in the best possible overall shape. And then training specifically for the javelin, I will go to whatever vacant park is available at whatever odd times, because throwing the javelin is really not something that you can do when there are people and dogs around. So I try to do that when I'm competing. I try to do that 2-3 times a week. But that's it.
So do you have a season? Is there a certain time of year where you say this is my track, this is my field season, I'm going to hit a certain number of events, or do you just kind of just generally watch for things and then jump on it when an opportunity presents itself, or how do you do that?
Well, as a masters track and field athlete, you have no off season. That's a common expression, and in my case, that's true. I start competing in open college meets wherever I can, and those usually start in January. And the Huntsman Games are in the beginning of October, and that's typically my last meet of the year. And I'm competing at whatever meets are available between January and October.
Wow. So that ends up being about how many, Linda?
Oh, well, good question. I couldn't tell you.
That's
honestly,
okay.
I try to compete in whatever national meets, both Senior Olympics and Masters track and field that come along. It's a really good question. There's probably 4 open college meets that I compete in, a couple of national meets, and maybe 6 or 8 other meets are available.
So that's a pretty ambitious schedule.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. Well, if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life, and we're visiting with Linda Cohn, who is a javelin thrower in the Huntsman World Senior Games. And Linda, I want to change topics just a little bit on you. You mentioned that when you were a little girl, you didn't have many opportunities to compete, but you did play softball, and that was something that your parents got you involved in and that you enjoyed. Talk a little bit about what changes you've seen in health and fitness during your lifetime, coming from someone who didn't have a lot of opportunities to somebody who is now competing in 8 to 12 to 14 to 16 meets in a year.
Well, if you're talking health and fitness as it pertains to, let's say, older adults, it's completely different from what I remember it being when I was younger. And very few of us remember our parents doing competitive athletics.
Right, that's true.
We are of that baby boomer generation, and those of us who are of that generation are trying to maintain an active lifestyle, trying to be healthier, trying to eat better. And there are opportunities like this that are available. Unfortunately, even though the Huntsman World Senior Games is being very well publicized now, a lot of people don't realize that there is a big world of Senior Olympics and Masters track and field out there. And it seems like I'm always telling someone who's never heard of it before about this world. And though the opportunities exist, I think they need to be a little bit better publicized.
Yeah. That makes me think of a question, Linda, and that is, as far as lifestyle goes, as far as looking and feeling younger, do you see a difference between your friends who are active and who compete like you do, as opposed to maybe your friends who've kind of thrown in the towel?
No question. But most of the people I hang out with are very active now. Yes, it's true. Those that are active and have goals and are willing to try new things and put themselves out there seem to be living a better, a happier life, a more fulfilling life than those who don't take part in these types of activities.
So what kind of things do you say to people who you run into who have never participated and maybe even never heard of the opportunity? How do you kind of get them from, I've never heard of this thing, to, hey, why don't you come with me to the next meet?
Pretty much that's what I do. I've been a dental hygienist for 38 years, and I can't tell you how many people who have sat in my chair I have told about all these things. But typically that's what I say. I tell them what I do, people that I know. I explain what I do, and they're like, oh, well, how do you do that? Where do you go? What do you do? And actually the first event, or the first thing I ever tell them to look up is the Huntsman World Senior Games, because that was my first big track meet, and that was, going there the first time was a memory I will treasure forever. And I think it's a great place for everyone else to start. So pretty much that's what I do. I direct them to your website.
Well, that's a great place for people to go. And incidentally, that website is www.seniorgames.net for those who might be wondering. You've mentioned and talked a little bit about your involvement with the Huntsman World Senior Games, and you got involved with the games the very first year that you were eligible. At 50 years old, you said, hey, this is where I'm going, and you went and competed. Do you have a favorite memory that really stands out to you as kind of the quintessential Huntsman World Senior Games experience?
Yes. There are two memories of that first time that I went. When I was on the runway going to throw the javelin for the first time in competition, I was living my Olympic dream. And there were a lot of women standing around, and we were throwing, and I threw my first one and my second one, and I was about to throw my last throw, and I started crying. And that's not normal for me. And there were two very kind women standing there who had no idea why I was crying. And they came over to me and they gave me a big hug, and they said, you're going to be great and everything's fine. And these two women, Wendy and Peggy, I have seen every year since then at the Huntsman Games. And we give each other a big hug every year, and we take a picture together. And that first time meeting those two women there is something I'll never forget. But the other thing that goes along with that is the opening ceremonies at the Huntsman World Senior Games. Talk about living your Olympic dream. When you march in behind the flag of your event and you sit in the stands, and there's skydivers with American flags, and the whole town of St. George, Utah seems to be there, and there's dancing and singing, and a former Olympic athlete ran around the track with a torch and lit that torch. I was definitely crying, and that was before the fireworks started. So talk about memories. Those are huge for me.
That's just awesome. And one thing I just want to mention before we start phasing out of this show is I am so impressed, Linda, that you started late, that you got involved, and that you are a world record holder. I mean, I almost feel like we didn't talk about that enough. You hold a world record in javelin in your age group, and it's something that you didn't even know you'd ever hold a world record until, maybe when you were 50 or 51, you started thinking, hey, I can do this. But it's just amazing.
It is amazing.
Well, the only thing that's really important about that is when I started, I just wanted to go and be a part of this. And then I was apart, and then I wanted to win, and then I kept trying to be better and better. I didn't realize at first that that's where this was going to lead. And that's why I encourage people to just start, to go, to experience this. Don't watch, to participate. And who knows where it's going to lead.
Well, that is fantastic, Linda, and that's all the time that we have for today. But thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we look forward to running into you here in St. George at the Huntsman World Senior Games.
I will be there. Thank you very much.
If you're listening live to the show and have been thinking that you might want to be involved and compete in the games in the same way that Linda has for the past several years, keep in mind that registration is about to close for the Huntsman World Senior Games. September 1st is the last day. You can You can register at seniorgames.net. That's www.seniorgames.net. And also don't forget to tune in next Thursday, where we'll continue to explore the active life on AM 1450 or FM 93.1 for those who are listening live. And those who are not can join us on the website, again, at seniorgames.net, and hear any of the previous shows. If you have any questions about the games or today's show, send us an email at theactivelife@seniorgames.net. And your final thought for the day is, it's very hard to understand in the beginning that the whole idea is not to beat the other runners. Eventually you learn that the competition is against the little voice inside you that wants you to quit. Inside you that wants you to quit. Inside you that wants you to quit. Inside you that wants you